Let's be honest, there's nothing quite like that split-second sting when someone dismisses you, talks over you, or subtly undermines your authority. It's humiliating, frustrating, and makes you question every ounce of your self-respect. Machiavelli knew this, centuries before Twitter arguments and office politics made it a daily reality. He understood power in its rawest, most unapologetic form. Respect is not freely given, it is earned, managed, and when necessary, enforced. And the truth is, most people fail spectacularly at it, leaving themselves exposed to ridicule, manipulation, and disrespect. Now, imagine for a moment the person who never hesitates, never wavers, and never allows disrespect to linger. People walk on eggshells around them, not because they're cruel, but because they've mastered the subtle and often hilarious art of making sure no one underestimates their presence. Machiavelli called this mastery over perception, influence, and human behavior. It's not about being feared for the sake of fear, nor respected for the sake of appearances. It's about creating a personal aura so firm, so undeniable, that the idea of crossing you becomes unthinkable. And here's the kicker. Most of us spend years trying to assert authority, only to find that the world ignores our efforts entirely. The comedy of human behavior is that disrespect is rarely personal, it's predictable. Someone dismisses you in a meeting, but it's not because you're incompetent, it's because you haven't yet established psychological territory. You haven't signaled that your time, opinion, or presence is not negotiable. Machiavelli understood that human beings are endlessly calculating. They test boundaries constantly. Those who succeed in commanding respect know how to anticipate these tests and respond with precision, sometimes with subtlety, sometimes with boldness. And when done correctly, the results are astonishing. People adjust instantly, often without realizing why. Even in everyday life, subtle disrespect accumulates. The friend who interrupts constantly, the colleague who undercuts ideas, the stranger who treats you like an afterthought, all of it chips away at confidence. Machiavelli's insight was that power and respect are not abstract qualities. They are lived, exercised, and reinforced in real time. The humorous and slightly cruel truth is that most people flail in these moments, replying awkwardly, arguing unnecessarily, or overcompensating, all while the underlying issue remains unaddressed. They haven't established themselves as unassailable. And this isn't about being a tyrant. Far from it. It's about control, presence, and perception. Machiavelli understood that humans respond to clear signals. Authority without clarity invites challenge. Ambiguity invites mockery. People who establish boundaries effectively, who carry themselves with awareness and strategy, rarely need to fight for respect. They project it effortlessly. And the subtle humor is in watching the world test boundaries, only to retreat quietly when they realize the rules have changed. Even social interactions, from casual conversations to professional encounters, reveal the patterns. Someone who can navigate dialogue, project confidence, and respond strategically to micro-challenges earns a subtle form of immunity from disrespect. Others, unconsciously, adjust behavior to match the new dynamic. Machiavelli would call this mastery of perception, the idea that influence is rarely about brute force, but about guiding how others experience your presence. The results are almost cinematic. The same person who once ignored you now seeks your opinion, adjusts their tone, or hesitates before challenging you. Power, of course, is part psychology, part timing, and part humor, though often the humor is dark. People test limits, poke at authority, and laugh at what they perceive as weakness. Those who survive and thrive learn to anticipate these behaviors, to read the room, and to respond in ways that subtly recalibrate respect. Machiavelli's brilliance was recognizing that this is a game with predictable rules. Human behavior is consistent, and those who master perception control the outcome. The comedy is in watching repeated attempts at undermining fail spectacularly against someone who understands the invisible rules. Even in professional settings, subtle disrespect can determine outcomes. The colleague who speaks over you, the supervisor who dismisses your ideas, the team member who sidesteps responsibilities. These microaggressions accumulate unless addressed strategically. Machiavelli would argue that the key is not confrontation alone, but creating an aura of inevitability, a sense that challenging you is not only futile but unwise. It's psychological chess, and the brilliance lies in the subtlety. The results are almost comical for the observer. Those who once tested boundaries now tread lightly, often without realizing why. Even friendships are subject to these dynamics. The person who constantly borrows favors, interrupts conversations, or treats generosity as weakness is testing boundaries. Machiavelli's principle is that respect, like power, is cultivated, not assumed. By understanding human behavior, signaling limits clearly, and responding strategically, you can establish a presence that is honored rather than ignored. The humor and satisfaction is in noticing how people adjust without realizing it. The same person who once imposed casually now hesitates, recalibrates, and often defers. And the secret, which is as simple as it is brilliant, is perception. People do not react solely to actions, they react to the signals you emit. Presence, confidence, timing, and subtle enforcement of boundaries communicate authority far more effectively than confrontation alone. Machiavelli would smile. Those who master these invisible cues rarely face disrespect. And the comedy is in watching human arrogance collide with deliberate, measured authority. Attempts to belittle or undermine fail, often in ways that feel almost cinematic. Even minor social interactions can be transformed. Someone who interrupts, jokes at your expense, or tests your patience is performing a predictable script. Those who understand human behavior respond with calm, strategic precision, signaling that respect is not negotiable. The result is immediate recalibration, subtle glances, altered tone, hesitation in future interactions. Machiavelli's insight is that power operates as much in perception as in action. The humor is that this is repeatable, predictable, and often surprising for the uninitiated observer. The same challenges that once caused frustration now dissolve before you even raise a finger. And authority is not about domination, it is about influence. Machiavelli's brilliance lay in recognizing that people respond to subtle, consistent cues. The individual who carries presence, enforces boundaries subtly but firmly, and anticipates challenges commands respect effortlessly. Others adjust, sometimes without realizing why, and the person who once struggled with micro-disrespect now moves through social and professional spaces with a quiet, undeniable authority. The comedy is quiet but undeniable. The world repeatedly tests boundaries, only to be gently corrected by someone who understands the game. By now, the principle is clear. Respect is neither given nor automatic. It is cultivated, exercised, and reinforced in real time through presence, perception, and strategic engagement. Machiavelli's teachings illuminate the path. Understand human behavior, anticipate challenges, signal boundaries, and project authority. The result is transformative. Those who once dismissed you now defer, hesitate, and recalibrate, often without conscious awareness. And the subtle humor is unavoidable. Human arrogance meets its match in someone who understands the rules of perception and influence. Finally, the takeaway: respect is not an entitlement. It is a product of strategy, awareness, and presence. Those who master the art of influence, perception, and boundary setting rarely encounter sustained disrespect. The world tests limits endlessly, but when authority is projected with clarity and consistency, those tests dissolve. Machiavelli's insight is timeless. Power and respect are cultivated, and the consequences of mastery are both transformative and quietly amusing. Once you start seeing the world through Machiavelli's lens, disrespect begins to look a lot less like a personal affront and a lot more like predictable human behavior. People test boundaries constantly. It's almost comical when you pay attention. The colleague who interrupts, the friend who makes a joke at your expense, the stranger who assumes you won't assert yourself, all performing the same unconscious scripts. The secret is that they aren't truly disrespectful in a personal sense. They are probing for limits, and most people respond clumsily, either with aggression, apology, or avoidance. Machiavelli would smile knowingly. There is a far better way to navigate these tests, and it's strategic, subtle, and almost cinematic in its precision. One of the first lessons is that presence matters more than words. You could deliver the most eloquent argument in a meeting, but if your body language, tone, and energy signal uncertainty, hesitation, or desperation, people will test you. They will cross lines, interrupt, or undermine. The magic happens when you align your internal confidence with outward signals. Even small gestures, maintaining calm, making eye contact, holding space, communicate authority in ways that override logic. People respond to presence before content. And here's the humorous side. The same people who once challenged you nervously check themselves, adjusting behavior almost immediately, often without understanding why. Another principle is strategic timing. Responding to disrespect impulsively is like jumping into a chess game without considering your moves. It might feel satisfying in the moment, but it rarely creates lasting authority. Machiavelli observed that patience, anticipation, and measured response are far more effective. When someone tests you, there's often a subtle psychological rhythm: the challenge, the assessment, and the opportunity to reassert authority. Respond too early, too aggressively, or too passively, and the lesson is lost. Respond with strategic precision, and respect solidifies like cement, quietly reshaping the social dynamic. The humor here is in watching repeated attempts to provoke fail spectacularly. Even social hierarchies follow predictable patterns. In any group, work, friends, family, there are those who push boundaries, those who conform, and those who test limits. The person who understands Machiavellian principles can navigate this dynamic with ease. They identify potential challengers, anticipate behavioral patterns, and project a presence that discourages undermining. The result is subtle but unmistakable. People who once ignored or dismissed you now adjust automatically, granting respect not because they fear punishment, but because the dynamic has shifted in your favor. And yes, there's a quiet comedy in how effortlessly this works when done correctly. Micro-disrespect is particularly interesting because it accumulates. Someone interrupting repeatedly, speaking over you, or dismissing your ideas in small ways may seem minor at first, but over time, it chips away at confidence and authority. Machiavelli would advise viewing these moments not as insults, but as opportunities. Each slight is a test, a chance to establish boundaries and project influence. The key is strategic engagement, a calm, measured response, a subtle assertion of presence, or even a well-timed silence can reset the social balance. And the amusing truth is that once mastered, the same challenges that once frustrated you become almost entertaining in their predictability. Even humor can be deployed strategically. People underestimate the power of wit and timing. A well-placed joke, lightly sarcastic remark, or ironic observation can signal awareness, confidence, and control, all without direct confrontation. Machiavelli knew that influence is often psychological. The perception of authority, rather than brute force, drives respect. By subtly signaling that you are unshakable, aware, and strategically engaged, people recalibrate, often without consciously realizing it. The humor here isn't just for you. It reshapes interactions, diffusing tension while reinforcing authority. Psychology plays a critical role as well. People unconsciously scan for signals of strength and weakness. Body language, tone, and even micro-expressions convey far more than words. Machiavelli understood this intuitively, long before neuroscience confirmed it. Humans respond first to cues, then to content. Those who master these signals establish a kind of invisible armor. Disrespect becomes less a possibility and more a distant memory. And the quiet comedy? Watching people stumble and self-correct when they thought they could undermine you is endlessly satisfying without being cruel. Strategic unpredictability is another tool. If your reactions are always predictable, people learn to test boundaries more aggressively. But when you vary timing, tone, and responses calm, sometimes firm, other times humorous occasionally, you keep others off balance. Machiavelli would argue that the perception of unpredictability, when controlled, projects power without aggression. Those who attempt to test you hesitate, unsure how you will respond. And there's a subtle, almost cinematic humor in watching confident provocations fizzle against someone who has mastered this art. Even casual interactions reveal the principle. Someone brushing off your input, joking at your expense, or subtly undermining you in conversation is performing a psychological probe. Respond clumsily, and you reinforce their pattern. Respond with awareness, timing, and strategic presence, and you reset the balance. Over time, repeated patterns of behavior adjust in your favor. Machiavelli's insight is that authority is rarely given. It is built moment by moment through consistent, subtle mastery of perception and response. The humor is that many of these moments, when viewed objectively, feel like a game that everyone else is playing, and losing against your newfound mastery. Even in leadership, these principles shine. The manager who communicates clearly, anticipates challenges, and projects calm authority commands respect effortlessly. The team adjusts behavior almost unconsciously, creating smoother interactions and fewer conflicts. Machiavelli understood that influence is both psychological and relational. When people perceive consistent authority, they respond with deference rather than defiance. And the subtle humor? Watching former challengers now hesitate, measure their words, and almost instinctively honor boundaries you set is quietly satisfying and strangely amusing. The transformational insight is clear. Disrespect is not personal, it is predictable. People test limits constantly, but mastery over perception, timing, and response allows you to establish authority effortlessly. Presence, subtle strategic engagement, and psychological awareness produce respect without aggression. Those who fail to recognize these principles expend energy reacting, arguing, or apologizing, while those who understand them move through life with a quiet, unshakable influence. And the humor is in the predictability. The world repeatedly tests boundaries, only to encounter someone prepared, aware, and strategically poised. By now, the principle emerges. True authority is cultivated, not demanded. Machiavelli's genius lies in recognizing that respect is a product of perception, timing, and strategic engagement. Every micro-challenge, every subtle insult, every boundary test is an opportunity to reinforce presence. Those who master this art rarely encounter sustained disrespect. Others, unaware of the dynamics, flail in frustration, often oblivious to why their efforts fail. The humor and satisfaction are inseparable. Human arrogance meets its match in deliberate, conscious authority. Finally, the key takeaway: respect is earned, projected, and maintained moment by moment. Machiavelli's timeless wisdom teaches that awareness of human behavior, subtle signaling, and strategic engagement transform interactions. Disrespect becomes unlikely, challenges dissolve before they escalate, and the individual who masters these principles navigates life with quiet authority. The subtle humor and satisfaction lie in the simplicity of the truth. The world repeatedly tests, and those prepared respond with precision, presence, and psychological insight. By now, you've seen the patterns unfold. People test boundaries constantly, and disrespect is rarely personal. It's predictable human behavior. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He realized that the world doesn't hand out respect freely. It must be cultivated, maintained, and reinforced through presence, strategy, and perception. The subtle genius of this approach is that it doesn't rely on aggression or dominance alone. Authority, he knew, is as much about psychological mastery as it is about any outward display of power. And once you understand the invisible rules, interactions that once frustrated or humiliated you suddenly become manageable, predictable, and even quietly amusing. Consider everyday life: the friend who interrupts, the colleague who dismisses ideas, the stranger who assumes they can undermine you. These micro-challenges, when left unchecked, accumulate into frustration, resentment, and diminished authority. Most people react instinctively, snapping, apologizing, over-explaining, or pretending nothing happened. Machiavelli would call this the recipe for losing influence. The alternative, subtle as it may seem, is mastery, a calm, strategic, and deliberate response that signals unmistakable presence. When done right, The world recalibrates almost automatically. The humor is in watching repeated attempts at testing fail, as if the universe itself is winking at your newfound awareness. Even social hierarchies reinforce these dynamics. From the office to family gatherings, from casual friend groups to professional networks, people continuously test limits. The individual who projects consistent authority, enforces subtle boundaries, and anticipates challenges rarely faces overt disrespect. Others unconsciously adjust, often without realizing why. Machiavelli's insight is profound. Influence is less about overt force and more about shaping perception. When people perceive strength, awareness, and control, they respond with deference rather than defiance. And the quiet comedy? Observing former challengers hesitate, self-correct, or even overcompensate when they realize the dynamic has shifted. Even humor becomes a tool in this mastery. A well-timed joke, ironic observation, or lightly sarcastic comment can communicate awareness and confidence while diffusing tension. It signals that you are unshakable, attuned, and capable of engaging with challenges without losing composure. Machiavelli understood intuitively that influence is psychological. People respond to perceived competence, presence, and clarity before they respond to content. Humor, subtle and controlled, magnifies this effect, reinforcing authority while keeping interactions dynamic. The result is a world where disrespect becomes increasingly unlikely because the cost of testing boundaries grows, sometimes humorously, often silently, but always effectively. Even professional settings illustrate these principles vividly. A manager who embodies presence, anticipates challenges, and communicates with strategic clarity commands respect effortlessly. A team adjusts behavior almost unconsciously. Conflicts diminish and collaboration improves. Machiavelli's wisdom extends here. Authority is relational, dynamic, and reinforced. Moment by moment, the humor emerges naturally. Those who once attempted to undermine or dismiss now navigate interactions with care, as if the rules have subtly but decisively changed. Micro-disrespect, the tiny slights and boundary tests that accumulate over years, is perhaps the most revealing. Someone speaking over you in a meeting, a colleague undermining a proposal, or a friend disregarding your opinion is performing predictable behavior. Those who understand the rules of perception respond strategically. A calm assertion, a subtle boundary, or a measured silence reshapes the interaction. Over time, the pattern shifts decisively in your favor. Machiavelli would argue that authority is built in these moments, quietly, consistently, and invisibly. And the humor is in how effortlessly the same tests that once caused irritation dissolve. Psychology confirms what Machiavelli observed. Humans are wired to respond to cues of competence, confidence, and clarity. Body language, tone, and timing communicate far more than words. By mastering these signals, you create an aura of authority. People instinctively recognize and respect boundaries when presented with consistent, deliberate cues. Machiavelli's insight was prescient. Influence is a subtle art, and mastery produces respect without confrontation. The comedy, quiet and dark, is in seeing how those who once challenged now hesitate, unsure how to proceed. Even minor social interactions reveal these dynamics. Someone brushing off your input, testing your patience, or speaking dismissively is probing for boundaries. Most respond clumsily, but mastery transforms the exchange. Calm, strategic engagement signals authority. Over time, habitual patterns of micro-disrespect disappear. Machiavelli's brilliance lies in recognizing that respect is neither granted nor assumed. It is cultivated moment by moment through subtle influence, presence, and strategic engagement. The humor is in the predictability. Repeated tests fail spectacularly against someone who understands the game. Strategic unpredictability amplifies authority. When reactions are consistently predictable, people learn to test limits more aggressively. But when responses vary, calm now, firm later, humorous occasionally, others remain off balance. Machiavelli would argue that controlled unpredictability projects power without aggression. The results are almost cinematic. Challenges that once escalated dissolve silently, boundaries are honored unconsciously, and the individual moves through social and professional spaces with quiet, unshakable influence. And yes, watching arrogant behavior fizzle in real time is quietly, deliciously satisfying. The final lesson is transformational. Respect is a living, dynamic construct, shaped by perception, presence, and strategic engagement. Machiavelli's timeless insight teaches that those who understand human behavior, anticipate challenges, and project consistent authority rarely face sustained disrespect. Challenges become manageable, social dynamics shift effortlessly, and the individual navigates life with a quiet, commanding influence. And the subtle humor of it all is undeniable. The world repeatedly tests boundaries, only to encounter someone prepared, aware, and masterful. Presence, awareness, and strategic engagement become the invisible armor protecting your authority. Micro-disrespect, provocations, and boundary tests no longer derail your confidence. Instead, they serve as opportunities to reinforce influence. Over time, people adjust unconsciously, respect becomes habitual, and your interactions transform. Machiavelli would call this mastery, the art of shaping perception, controlling influence, and commanding respect in a world that otherwise rewards chaos and impulsive reactions. And the ultimate takeaway is simple yet profound. No one can disrespect you persistently when you master the art of presence, perception, and strategic response. Authority is built in the details, enforced subtly, and communicated through every interaction. The consequences are transformative. Confidence, calm, and influence replace frustration, irritation, and vulnerability. And the humor, often quiet and dark, comes from observing how predictable human arrogance collapses in the face of deliberate, calculated presence. Finally, the transformational truth. Respect is not a gift, it's an art. Machiavelli's insights, centuries old, reveal that mastery over perception, timing, and subtle psychological influence makes disrespect nearly impossible. Those who understand and apply these principles move through life with confidence, command, and quiet satisfaction. The world tests boundaries endlessly, but when you are prepared, aware, and strategic, challenges dissolve, authority solidifies, and life unfolds on your terms. And, if you watch closely, the process is as amusing as it is empowering.